Ch08 Thinking, Language, and Intelligence, Part 1. So let's talk about thinking. What is thinking anyway? In terms of thinking and language and intelligence, these are closely related facets of cognition. Cognition definition is those mental activities that would involve acquiring, storing, retrieving, as well as using knowledge. So every time you take information, that's you mentally act on it and work on it. Basically, that's what we are doing when we're thinking. Our thought processes are going to distribute throughout our brain's networks, so those neurons are going to be firing up. And even though they're firing, realize they are also localized. So one example might be if we're using problem solving for decision making, of course our brains are going to be active within that prefrontal cortex. And again, that's that region that helps us with our complex ideas, helping us to make plans, formulations, being able to conceptualize, initiate in actions. It allows us to put our attention and focus into one particular thing when need be, helps us in multitasking, although sometimes multitasking is not a great thing, but it do help to support multitasking. That prefrontal cortex, excuse me, the prefrontal cortex will also help us to link to other areas within our brain, like our limbic system. That's going to help us to synthesize that information within many of our different senses. So where does it occur? Again, remember prefrontal cortex, okay? Now, the building blocks of thought. We generally like to have a mental image helps us to be able to think. That being, we'll use that stored information that comes from previous experiences, and those experiences can use any of our senses, that being smell, touch, taste, the way we move, the way we think about as far as if we're looking at food, for example. In terms of talking about our concepts, these are those mental representations that would be particularly of a group or category that'll help us uh, to be able to link similar type of characteristics. Like when we're talking about animals, we'll know the difference between a dog and a wolf. Um, Talking about speaking of camping, that being whether we would use a regular log cabin with all the amenities, or are we really going raw and using just a tent? And the list can go on. So the question has to be then, how do we develop our concept? Well, in speaking about concepts, there are prototypes that we use. There's those artificial type concepts. Then we have concept hierarchies that'll help us to simplify and be able to break it down and organize our information. Like if we encounter a bird, we might fit that existing concept of a bird into a class. Like I own a condor. Y'all might have heard in some of the previous videos, you might have heard Charlie speaking. Well, I would put in a class of birds of parrots because that's the type of bird he is. Although he's a condor, he's part of the parrot family. Whereas it might be a hummingbird, and I might put a hummingbird into a different class. So when we're talking about that classification, we might use that artificial type of concept, and it helps us to form those logical rules or definitions that allows us to be able to do those classifications. That being whether if the animal has wings, then it's considered a bird. If it lays eggs, then we have to consider what type of bird. Is it a chicken, or you get the picture. So when we're talking about prototypes, initially when we learn about the world, like a young child that we were once, we developed general natural type of concepts, and then we based this on those typical type of representations, or what we call a prototype. So going back to the bird example, if the bird of a parent points out the number of different examples, then our prototype of birds allows us to quickly classify that all flying animals like robins and hummingbirds and condors it allows us to be able to classify them correctly. Those artificial concepts, again, is created those things artificially where we place rules and definitions in for them. So an example might be it might not quite fit the prototype like a penguin would. So we'll have to use our minds and think about how the bird is. What is that artificial concept of the bird? Are they warm-blooded animals? Do they speak? Can they fly? Do they have wings? Do they have beaks? And the list goes on. So although a penguin doesn't fly, it does have wings, it does have a beak, it do lay eggs. So then we would classify the penguin as a bird. Hopefully that's kind of helps to clear it up. But the third area when we're talking about strategies of learning concepts is when we're talking about hierarchies. Now this is when we're grouping concepts as subcategories with a broader concept. Creating these hierarchies or subcategories within broader concepts helps us to master new material even faster and easier than just looking at it from still. If we have a construct within our mind, we already start to work and build upon that, okay, through that hierarchy. So when we first learn something, we'll primarily, look at the basic level of the concepts. Children had tend to learn birds before learning high order concept of animal or the low order concept of a robin. So with this in mind, when we do a hierarchy, first we know that a bird would be an animal. Then the next level of that hierarchy gives us more basic level concepts, that being difference between the bird and the dog, and so forth. All right, so problem solving. The 3 steps to the goal. The first thing we have to talk about is preparation. And in preparing, we identify facts. So what are your basic non-negotiable limits and desires is what you might think of, okay? Separating those relevant from irrelevant facts to what we deem to be negotiable, okay? So it helps us to be more clear about our ultimate goal. In terms of production, we look at algorithms, we look at heuristics. Algorithms are basically the step-by-step procedures we're going to follow in order to reach a goal. Heuristics is when you think about it like this: buy low, sell high. Join clubs that specialize in things that you like to do, such as like meeting a person or meeting a partner. It's that simple rule or shortcut that we might have that really doesn't give us a guaranteed solution, but it helps us to kind of bring in those alternatives and options that we might have. Now, in terms of evaluation, here it's a 2-step. We take that production and we look and see how we might match it up. Think about Match.com. Okay, well, their theory comes similar from this. Okay, this go in our reaching a goal. If we can match up our production to the algorithms or to the person that we might like, eureka, our problem is solved. If not, we go back to step 1 in trying to prepare and trying to figure it out. So, barriers to problem solving. Take a moment and look at this slide and think about if you had a box of matches or a book of matches, and think about the candle and how would it be for you to be able to light a candle. In this particular example, what they're doing is they're showing a candle lit on top of the box. Okay, your textbook gives more directions to this, so take a look at it. You might want to try it yourself, but don't set a fire to your house, please, by all means. But the question is, how do we get the box not to topple over? Well, in this slide, it kind of shows you where if you set it up right in a particular fashion and include holes in it, that it should stay up with no problem. Now, there's a lot of different type of examples here when we're having barriers of talking about problem solving, things that might give us difficulties. So in this particular slide, one thing I want you to look at is that confirmation bias, because other barriers to effective problem solving stems from our tendency to be able to ignore important information. So, have you ever caught yourself agreeing with your friends who support your political opinions and then discounting conflicting opinions? Well, this inclination to be able to seek out this confirmation for our pre-existing type of beliefs, as well as look over contradictory evidence, that is known as that confirmation bias. So take a look, and here it might say a student who is going to write a research paper may primarily search for information that would confirm his or her beliefs. The student may fail to search for or fully consider information that is inconsistent with his or her beliefs. That's confirmation bias. Then you might want to look at it in this aspect. A reporter who's writing an article on an important issue may only interview experts who support his or her ideas or views on the issue and not get a full picture of it. That's what we call confirmation bias. And here's one more example. I'll leave that for you to read. You can pause the slide so that you'll read it, and you can see just another example of that. All right. So now, finally, we talk about availability heuristic. Now, remember, heuristics we are building up on is kind of giving us the hierarchy, allowing us to help, but it works with judging the likelihood or the probability that a particular situation, whether or not it's going to be available to us, or is it something that's working through our memories. Representativeness of heuristic would be estimating how probable something might actually occur between those particular circumstances that we were able to match up from the previous prototypes. So people who read more case studies of a successful business, they may judge the probability of running a successful business to be far greater than those who have not made the readings. And if you were to meet 3 people, for example, from a company, and they're all aggressive, then the assumption is going to be that this company has a aggressive type of environment, and that everybody that works there appears to be aggressive, or let's say assertive. All right, so recognition heuristics. This is when judgments are going to be made relying on those single cues of things that we recognize. And sometimes in doing that, we tend to ignore other information that might be available. So this example shows about students here in the U.S. as well as in Germany, being in the 2 sample cities that was researched, where they were asked and chose to choose a city which had the larger population. Well, both Germans and Americans kind of scored well because they both had very little information, but they was able to choose cities that were recognizable as being of the larger of the 2. Now, it's time to pause the video. I want you to be able to take a minute and read this slide, okay? And then after you've take about 5 minutes, take your time and actually read it, y'all. But take time, 3 to 5 minutes, and then try to problem solve this particular strategy. I want you to think about everything that was discussed so far and look at concepts. Think about things like functional fixedness and set, and everything that I just discussed. And tell me what's wrong with this friend's reasoning within this vignette, okay? And what I'll probably do is, once you've completed this, we'll make this probably the extra credit assignment, and I'll probably give you the answer in the next video. How's that? All right, so we're gonna move on. Don't forget to pause though and read it for yourselves. Now, creativity, elements of creative thinking. We would hope that we all possess some form of creative type of thinking. To be able to be innovative is a form of creativity. But three elements of creative thinking includes originality. You want to be unique and different and be able to demonstrate different ways of solving an issue or a problem. Fluency is being able to come up with many different type of solutions to a particular problem, issue, or what you plan on doing to complete a goal. Flexibility is being willing to shift yourself with ease from one type of problem-solving technique to another. Okay, so on this slide, you have Thomas Edison and how he approached his work in innovations. So in terms of originality, he was able to find that electricity passing through a conductor helped to produce that red or white heat. It allowed Edison to be able to imagine light to be used for more, than what was originally considered during his time. Lighting up this room is what came to Edison's mind. In terms of fluency, he kind of went through 100 different things, only to be able to see that with the heat was going to point glowing without burning up. He finally came up with what? The light bulb. Finally, with flexibility, so when he couldn't find a long-lasting material, he kept trying and trying, and he would start eventually going to try heating it in a vacuum, which then allowed that light bulb to exist. So these are certain ways that we work ourselves toward creation, okay? And we utilize those three elements of originality, fluency, and flexibility. All right. Anybody seen the Divergent series? I love that movie series. And divergent thinking. This is what I want you to look at in terms of thinking and creativity. Think about thinking out of the box, basically. In 5 minutes, how many words do you think you can make from letters from hippopotamus? Divergent thinking is that way of producing many alternatives from a single starting point and then taking it into a major element of creativity, okay? Then in terms of investment theory, you're going to want to be using resources in order to be able to make original ideas more popular and worth more. So creative people, they might buy low in the realm of creative ideas, and then when they got that idea together, they're going to sell high because they find it to have a high value. So when we're using these items from traditional tests of creativity, I want you to be able to think of all the uses that can be done, for example, like for a brick or a paperclip. Take time and try to find the many words of a hippopotamus. Take time and tell me, what do you think you can create if you had a brick and a paperclip before you? Think about it, and then you can move on. Don't forget to pause the video while you're doing it. All right. Let's talk about resources for creative people, and then we're going to stop at this point for this the first part of Chapter 8. Investment theory, it also suggests that creativity requires the coming together of 6 interrelated type of resources. So one way to be able to improve your personal creativity is to be able to study this list and then strengthen yourself in those areas you think you'll need improvement in. Kind of think about how I give practice tests before you do the actual exam. It helps to strengthen and allows you to think more about it. So our resources that we have available to us would be knowledge, and that's going to be that basic information that we have to help us to effectively evaluate and come up with possible solutions. Then the way you think, your thinking style. These are the ideas and your abilities that you'll be able to look through and pick through and decide whether one particular problem-solving technique is going to be better than another way. You might tackle your studying and saying, oh, well, Cramming I find to be better for me than spacing out, which we know it should be the reverse. But some people will still cram. But that's one's thinking style, and we all have different thinking styles. We also have to include our personalities. Our personality has a lot of how we're willing to be able to grow, change. If we're going to be a type of person, A type that's got to have everything in order in a specific way, or we type B personalities where we're laid back, so we're going to approach our problem solving techniques with ease. Do we take those kind of risks? Um, are we willing to overcome obstacles? Our personality is constructed to help us work through those different avenues. In terms of motivation, how we accomplish that. Is it going to be instinctual? Is it drive reduction theory? Do we need incentives? These are the type of things that we would look at in terms of motivation. Finally, but not least, is environment. What type of environment are you in to be able to support your level of creativity? Now, I love to make dolls. Therefore, the environment that I have for myself is I have a room full of everything that I need. I had to buy it. It wasn't free. But things that would help me to create dolls is what that type of environment has to be structured with. That being paint, that being stuffing for the stuff the dolls with, clay if I want to do sculpturing of a doll, vinyl kits if I want to paint on a doll. So the list go on of how you want your environment to be to help to support what type of creativity you want to do. If you're a person who loves music and want to sing, then you're going to have your environment infused with music or instruments or music sheets, and the list can go on. So we'll stop here for now, and we will pick up on part 2 of chapter 8. Thanks for listening.